So I will just give a short opening remark. Good morning, and it's an honor to welcome you to this exciting session as we dive into the evolving contours of the towards an international panel for ocean sustainability initiative. So in the context of the conference, Earth System Governance Conference, of course, the escalating global challenges ranging from climate change and biodiversity loss to intersectional vulnerabilities and geopolitical instabilities. Yeah, the need to reimagine the interfaces between science, policy, society has never been so urgent. So, and at the heart of this discussion lies the essential role of global environmental assessments such as IPCC, IPBES, the World Ocean Assessment in the context of ocean sustainability, each of which offer insights that are critical to aligning global governance with planetary needs. But today, the ocean, which serves as a linchpin in the Earth system, is under severe threat. You can name it: overfishing, pollution, climate-driven acidification, not only endangering marine biodiversity, but also threatening the livelihoods of billions of people who depend on the ocean's resources. And to address these challenges, or to line up with other efforts on the interface of science and knowledge and policy decision-making, and supported by the European Union and a growing network of collaborators, we have the IPOS initiative, which is working to establish a transformative science policy society interface, or to help line up with other organizations to strengthen these interfaces. So IPOS is still in its seminal phase and is actively designing its concept, structure, and pilot initiatives through a series of collaborative engagements with stakeholders across the globe, within the academic community, but beyond, to civil society organizations and mostly governments, nation states representatives. So the objective is to build an innovative gateway for sustainable ocean governance that reconnects knowledge and decision-making to foster a healthy and thriving ocean. And the insights gathered through these engagements will lay the groundwork for IPOS formal designation at the upcoming United Nations Ocean Conference in Nice 2025. Either a formal designation or appreciation by member states of the need and feasibility studies of these new organizations with its services. So this session today is an opportunity to deepen our collective understanding of the initiative's development and its ambition agenda. And together we will identify ocean priorities from the Global South, ensuring that IPOS really supports the needs of this community, of our community in the Global South, through diverse knowledge systems and inclusive decision-making frameworks, but also from the point of view of the architecture that it will be proposed, and of course explore best practices for an effective science policy interface, emphasizing inclusivity, adaptability, and transdisciplinary knowledge co-production mechanisms. And we are especially thrilled to have participants from the Earth System governance community with us today, and contributing valuable insights from across the regions, disciplines, and perspectives, particularly those from the Global South. So I will, we have Dave Dobura, the co-chair of IPBES and a long-standing marine scientist, Leandra Gonçalves from Federal University of Brazil, working with coastal governance, and Tanya Brody-Rudolph, who is the co-lead of IPOS. We will also have a few words for us, an overview of what IPOS is all about. And hopefully Dylan will be able also to jump in and share his perspectives. We're a small group here on the room, which is also good for us to dive deeper. And after all the speakers are able to convey their reactions to what Tanya will be proposing, I will invite a lineup of contributors also from the participants registry. So thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Tanya for her address, and let's go for it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Leo. So hi, everybody. It's really wonderful to be here at the Earth System Governance Forum with you. And I'm very excited to give you some insights on the latest thinking of the IPOS. I'm going to start my slides. So just before I go there, I wanted to thank the Earth System Governance team for the opportunity for being here, and thank you, Leopoldo, for your important role in all of this. The objectives of today are to present to you the latest thinking about towards IPOS and to collect your feedback. And it's quite exciting for me today to present to you because I'm going to present to you really the very, very latest thinking on the IPOS. And you can see even in the name, we're undergoing a transformation process from having been in Barcelona this week with a whole group of ocean experts and specialists and really some of the top people in the world that could make it. Were there with us. Sorry, Leandro, your mic's on.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So we were even one of I mean, as simple as the name. It's been quite a fundamental sharpening of the toolbox this week. And the presentation I'm going to give you now is one that Leopoldo hasn't even seen yet because we haven't had time to fully catch up with each other. So there's some things that have been refined in the last few days. And one of them is the name. The question is open about whether its panel is an appropriate name and whether it should be something more open and inclusive like platform or partnership. So that's just the beginning of the changes. So let me take you through all of this. The process that we've come to today, just to give you some context, the IPOS idea has been emerging for about 2.5 years. Really started during COVID, actually towards the end of COVID, with Françoise Gall and myself. It's been a long process of a lot of meetings, interviews, analysis for the European Commission that was commissioned, many thousands of hours of meetings with different stakeholders. That's the background. This year, right now, what we've been doing just in the last few months is firstly, we've done a very comprehensive analysis of best practices with looking at 30 international organizations across 6 categories of best practices. And we extracted 25 best practice key cards, which I think are super useful for how an IPOS service or an IPOS mechanism, and this is one of the other reframings, is maybe IPOS should not be framed as a new organization, but rather as a new service or a new mechanism that fits into the system. And I'll explain a bit more about that just now. So these best practice categories are very detailed. They talk about the key findings for the IPOS, practical links to examples of these best practices in operation in other organizations, trying to bring together very best thinking and the very best operational for the most effective, transparent, inclusive, robust, agile, reflexive product that we can. We've also been doing a global consultation from July, and it's closing at the end of this month. We've sent this to 176 experts. The interesting thing about these responses is that some of them have been institutional responses. So even though we only received 115, which is still pretty good apparently for a survey in terms of percentages, some of the feedbacks were institutional. So they're from the CNRS, for example. So that's a real synthesis of all of the minds there, and from some of the universities and other scientific institutions, also from states and from UN organizations. We've also been running bilateral workshops and meetings with UN organizations, with international organizations like OECD, and the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, with UNESCO, with several member states. We're having another meeting actually with the USA this afternoon. We've met with Brazil in detail, with Leopoldo during the G20 Oceans 20 dialogue. And we've also just completed this offsite seminar in Barcelona that I mentioned a moment ago. What we've done now is we've collated all of this feedback that we've received and refined our thinking into this document called the Strategic Overview. It's about 15 to 20 pages, and the objective is for this to be the document with which we approach states for support It's a high-level synthesis of the value proposition of the IPOS, how it would work, what its functionality would be, how its governance could look, how it could be integrated into the UN system, how it could contribute to the current ocean ecosystem without being duplicative or dispersing of work that's already been done, because that is not what we want to do. This document will be accompanied by a blueprint, which will be a much more technical document, which will flesh out all of those best practices that I was mentioning a moment ago. And we will create a comprehensive blueprint of exactly how this IPOS entity or mechanism would work, with all of the detailed processes, procedures, budgets, best practices. So there are 4 key questions we're going to talk about. The first is the why an IPOS. The second is what will IPOS do? The third is how will it work? And the fourth is where do we stand right now and what's next? So to begin with the why, we're an ocean community, so we know that there is an ocean imperative right now. There is an ocean emergency, and we need to shift the needle on ocean sustainability. So the need is clear, and Leopoldo articulated that really beautifully just now. The second aspect of this is the very pivotal role that policymakers have in sustainability, because policymakers are where the rubber hits the road. They are the ones that have to implement these global targets that we create, assimilate this global knowledge that we produce, like IPBES is report that's just coming out, and Earth Commission's report. They have to assimilate all of that wisdom and knowledge and somehow interpret that and implement that in order to shift the needle in their own territories and their own waters for ocean sustainability. So they have a really important role to actually implement all of the work that we all do at the Science Policy Interface. And then thirdly, we've identified the fact that through all of the analysis that we've done, that there really is no need for a new organization generating knowledge. That need has been met and is met by many other organizations. But what is needed is something to amplify and render this knowledge that we have more inclusive, more accessible, and more actionable, to bridge the implementation gap. So that's really the transformative focus of the IPOS. The second part is what are the core services and how will the IPOS work? And each of these 3 services, I'll take you through in a moment, but each of these services has inherent IPOS DNA, as we call it DNA, but the principles of being demand-driven, so responding to state requests. We're not going to be going and saying, hey, this is what the ocean science community says you need to do. We will be waiting for requests where states come and say, I have a problem, I need to implement my 30 by 30 targets, or I have a development happening in a harbor, I have no idea what the impacts are, or I have a community that needs to be on board and I don't know how to do that. We will be waiting for requests. IPOS will also be inclusive of alternative knowledge sources and of all voices. And I know IPBES has walked a long journey with this, and we have a lot to learn from them. IPOS needs to be systemic and take into account the interconnections between land and sea, biodiversity and climate, and all of the interactions in the system. Very importantly, we believe that IPOS needs to bring a contextual relevance to states, where this global knowledge that's so brilliantly produced and available is translated in a way that they can actually use it in their system, in their legislative framework, and that's supported by context from their own scientists in the region, their own communities, their own leaders, and it needs to be timely. The knowledge that needs to drive ocean sustainability has to align with policy cycles and needs. So the 3 ocean action requests, I'm not sure if I have slides on them yet. So the first one is an ocean action request, which is the more formal, larger service that we envisage the IPOS services to offer. And this would be where a state requests the response to a complex problem. IPOS would open for two slots during each year with a dedicated portal, which will guide the requester as to which request they should ask for and how to frame that. Then we will go through a process of prioritization of requests. So in the event that we receive too many requests, there will be a process of prioritization, and one of the principles of the prioritization will be to focus on developing states' needs and states that have complex sustainability, cross-sectoral complex sustainability challenges that they need an external voice to bring some clarity to. Then we would go through a reformulation of the request so that it's actually a scientifically robust request, and then establish a dedicated hybrid, transdisciplinary or polylateral working group in the region from which the request emanates. These would be decentralized units that will be activated when a request comes into the area. And we'll talk about funding just now because I'm sure that that question will arise. The outcomes that we can expect from that would be that within 12 months, there would be an ongoing iteration during a 12-month period with government representatives to find the solution that's needed, to find the product that's most responsive to their needs, that is really actionable and relevant, and that actionable pathways are proposed within 12 months. We build capacity with people that need capacity building and ensure that dialogue is enforced. The other request is quite exciting, I think, and it relates to the emerging power of AI. This is called the Ocean Rapid Response, and this is where a state needs an urgent response within a matter of weeks. Sometimes states can't wait a year for a request, and so the intention here is to be able to provide a curated, bespoke response from an AI product that we're developing that will be a closed box of knowledge that we put into it, that comes from IPCC and IPBES and World Ocean Assessment and the Earth Commission and other sources of knowledge and peer-reviewed papers to generate a consolidated response within a really short time. That response will then be managed by a team of experts depending on the topic and the region. So there will be topical experts and regional experts who will then curate those results, verify them, peer review them, and we will provide the response to countries within weeks. The third one is more of a legitimacy or transparency tool for the ocean ecosystem, and this is called Ocean Sentinel. This allows the voice of private sector, civil society, indigenous and local peoples, and scientists to raise their hands and say, there is an issue that has not been considered by my state or by my region. We're really concerned about this. We can see this emerging as a priority and our state is not looking at it. We would like you to put pressure on our state to do that. And then these responses will be assimilated into a report that gets published once a year on an anonymous basis, which we then would hope would encourage a state to say, okay, this has an issue. It's been publicly shared. We need to pay attention to this. And then hopefully request either help from IPOS, from one of the services, or from one of the other knowledge bodies in the ocean ecosystem that can respond to that question. We believe that it would be a good idea from a perspective of sharing lessons just to summarize the results of the work that we've done every 2 years. So this is not a report like a World Ocean Assessment or an IPCC report. This is more a report of work done and lessons learned from the requests that we've responded to, so that there's comparable lessons that people can uptake in different regions and that we can accelerate building on each other's successes and also learn from the failures. And this would be coordinated by the Secretariat and go through a review process. It would also be a way of ensuring that we remain reflexive, that we are paying attention to what's worked and what hasn't. The third part is the how. Where would IPOS live in the ocean ecosystem? And this has been a very contested issue with many stakeholders over the last 2 years. And we've really come to a point where we believe that we can narrow the focus down to IOC, to working within the IOC system. Obviously, this is subject to member state decisions, but we've been working very closely with IOC, and we had an IOC, the head of the IOC Science with us in Barcelona. And the second part of the IOC's mandate is really this action-oriented approach. So the first part is to provide the science for member states. The second part is, how do you implement that science into action? The mandate is here on the slide, to really help states in the decision-making processes. And thus far, IOC hasn't really been able to deliver on that second part of its mandate. So if IPOS was integrated within IOC, it could really bring a lot of energy to that second part of the mandate. It could also create synergies within IOC through all the different programs, bringing together all of the different opportunities there, and then maximizing the impact of the Ocean Decade by taking all this catalyzed knowledge into the future and preparing for a post-2030 agenda. In terms of governance, I'm going to go through this very quickly, but we're currently envisaging that we would have a secretariat, a steering committee, which would be more of a traditional advisory role, and then a knowledge committee, which I think is really exciting. It's different to the traditional scientific committee, because on this committee, we want to have knowledge holders that are not only scientists, that bring other types of knowledge at a very high level to ocean governance. And we're in the process of developing the parameters of that committee with a knowledge committee development team, comprised mostly of Global South participants currently. We're actually struggling to get enough Global North participants on that. And the knowledge would work, I possibly sort of have half institutional inputs from the Coalition of Scientific Institutions and global partners and UN institutions, and then partly this decentralized network across the globe of knowledge holders that can be activated when a request from the region comes forward. The financial planning at the moment, we're thinking that we need around $3 million or euros, I think dollars, to start with a soft launch for a year and a half if we do that within the UN Decade program. And then after we've been able to run a pilot for a year and a half with some states, we could then go into full operational IPOS at the 2027 IOC Assembly. And the vision at the moment is around $10 million. And our feedback in Barcelona was that would not be enough money because of the costs of co-production and how much time and money that costs to do. The way in which this money would be generated is through a series of different layers. Firstly, there would be some UN funding, I hope, if we're within IOC, but we know that's very small. We would be definitely investigating philanthropic funding, also looking at the World Bank, Global Environmental Fund, and at some new innovative financial tools, because we believe that the scientists that work on the project should be paid, because scientists are overcapacitated, overworked and undercapacitated and overstretched. So if we want to move faster and bring knowledge together more quickly, we need to fund the science. So the objective is to do something quite innovative and different here. So where we stand now and what's next. So as Leopoldo mentioned, the objective is to present the final concept of the IPOS at UNOC 3, hopefully as a new decade program that will collate and coalesce all of the work that's been done during the decade. We have a lot of support already from states, from France, China, Canada, and Monaco, official support. We're in deep conversations with multiple other states currently, including Brazil and South Africa. We have more than 25 scientific institutions with us, supporting us, bringing scientific consensus on the need to do something differently at this interface. We have diverse experienced practitioners with us, advising us. Leopoldo is one of them. And we have a clear roadmap for the next 12 months, including finalizing our hosting scenario, securing funding for the next 2 years, and developing an alliance of states and scientific institutions who state their support for the IPOS. I know that was a lot to absorb, and but I hope that it cleared up some of your issues and questions that you may have had about the IPOS. There is a QR code if you want to scan, or you can look for us at ipos.earth if you want to engage. And I'm going to stop there. Thanks so much. I hope I didn't take too long.
Thank you, Tanya, for the brilliant presentation and with the overview of the challenges and the level of ambition that this initiative has, right? So I will invite our panelists to bring their most candid skepticism, but also constructive ideas. And I'm sure your minds are bubbling with questions and concerns. And so without further ado, I will share the floor to my friend Dave Dabura, who is the founding director of Cardio East Africa, a knowledge organization that is supporting sustainability of coral reef and marine systems in the Western Indian Ocean. He's also working in close connection with management, policy, building capacity, working with different stakeholders, managers, and policymakers at the local and regional level, transboundary level, but also has a strong and huge experience with large-scale organizations such as the IPBES, that currently he's the co-chair. He can speak more about it, the context of global environmental assessments, but also the Earth Commission and many others initiatives that I will let him speak on for himself. So welcome, David. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Leopoldo. Good afternoon, good morning to everybody, and good evening, depending on where you are. It's a pleasure to be here on this panel. Thanks a lot to Tanya for introducing the IPOS and where it is now, the new proposals or the consultations that have been done and consolidating on a concrete proposal. It's great to see that. Perhaps I'll explain a bit of my background and where I'm sitting right now for those that are not so aware on the in the webinar, and then give some reflections on what Tanya's just presented. So as Leopoldo indicated, my background is as a coral reef scientist with Cordio East Africa. We're a research organization in Kenya, but working at the regional level in East Africa. And then I've also worked globally with reef and tropical marine conservation, sustainability issues for a long time. And then now I'm the chair of IPBES, the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So one of the international science policy interfaces that exists alongside bodies like the IPCC on climate. We focus on biodiversity and ecosystem services. There's the World Ocean Assessment, which focuses on oceans. There's a new chemicals panel that is just starting up. And each of these intergovernmental international panels essentially addresses a particular domain of science relevant to policy and societal needs, and usually anchored under certain conventions or in relation to multiple environmental agreements in the case of IPBES. And of course, this is an area where, I've, like Tanya and Leopoldo and Leandro and others on the call, I've been working very much in this space of trying to improve governance of ocean systems. And how do we bring the right knowledge? How do we bring the right interests from countries, but then also from stakeholders, from communities, from the academic knowledge communities as well, of various types. And it's a big challenge. Now, I've come from a non-government background, working in research, trying to influence policy. Now I'm the chair of an intergovernmental process, which is a very different kind of a body to be in. In making my comments now, of course, I bring my experience from IPBES and what I know of IPBES, what I hear formally of what we can do, and in terms of interacting with other intergovernmental science policy interfaces. I'm not speaking for the platform in making my comments here, but speaking from that experience. And I certainly see as the idea of IPOS has developed, I come from the ocean space as well, and I see the immense challenge we have in bringing oceans to the forefront in international intergovernmental processes, particularly those that relate to societal priorities, global challenges like climate change, and economic drivers that we have, and so on. And the critical need we have for a coherent ocean presence in this space. How to make that happen, of course, is a big challenge. And I think it's been really good to see the consultative process that Tanya and Françoise have led with IPOS and all participants in this process to really find out, well, what would be useful? How could this be designed to have greatest impact? Because of course that's what we all want in the end. Now, IPBES itself, just to provide a bit of sort of comparison, as an intergovernmental body, we have 150 government members, almost 150. I think we're at 149 now. So it's growing. The intergovernmental space, of course, is the strongest policy space for having science recommendations being brought into decision making, but it's also very bureaucratic and very institutionalized. And like the IPCC, IPBES has a history. Certain decisions are made along the way through negotiations of the government parties, and those essentially fix the bureaucracy and the procedures that we have in moving forward. And it includes the degree to which we can interact with other similar or complementary bodies. So, for example, IPCC and IPBES, our procedures make us work in certain ways that we can't necessarily, we don't do joint assessments. We can't put out joint statements because our scientific processes are independent from each other. We have in the past conducted a joint workshop, which is not the same as doing a scientific assessment. And the findings from that workshop are critically important for biodiversity and climate change interactions and solutions, nature-based solutions, for example, in moving forward. But they don't hold the same strength as the findings from our assessments because they are not approved by the governments that are our parties. And so each platform or panel brings these findings to the government members through the ongoing assessments that we have, and they gain their strength through those processes. Now, how to bring oceans into to the same level of strength in the space, because it best includes all of biodiversity and ecosystem services or benefits to people. Oceans are a big part of that, but of course, as we all know, in the ocean space tends to get drowned out by terrestrial concerns and influences and priorities. So how to strengthen that is important. Oceans are very important in climate change as well, but again, from a particular perspective within the climate change processes. So really ensuring the oceans are well represented is a big challenge. And I think it's great to hear the emerging findings from the consultations is that, greater mechanisms are needed to really connect oceans in these spaces. Because I think it's very true. There isn't a taste in the current intergovernmental climate for a new institution, a new body related to sort of science and policy on oceans, because there are bodies that sort of touch on various parts of that. And of course, making those more efficient and effective and connecting across them is critically important. And the functions that IPOS can provide can really help to, build that connective tissue between the existing bodies, helping to connect scientists into IPBES or IPCC assessments or the World Ocean Assessment, trying to make sure through communicating and presenting the interests of stakeholders that ocean issues are in the forefront when these bodies do their assessments and so on. I think that all very much helps. And I think one aspect that's really important that's identified in what we're talking about here is, so we talk about IPBES and IPCC as science policy interfaces, but this is science, policy, and society. So that reach back into society from assessments is a critical step that we're all concerned about. We don't necessarily have the resources or the mandate to do it. So for example, in IPBES, we produce assessments. These are big, scientific documents. There's summaries for policymakers, are negotiated with the governments. And then once they're adopted, we publish those. And in essence, we don't actually have a mandate as a platform to then take the findings into decision-making processes within countries or within conventions. All we can do is report them and provide the information. And so the actual reach into society from those outputs, there can be a big gap there. And we're really looking at our policy outreach, policy support mechanisms, how we can, one, invest more as our procedures allow in taking the findings from our assessments and repackaging them in more accessible documents and products and so on. So government departments and decision makers and stakeholders hear about the results much more and can include them in what they do in their deliberations and so on. We're also working a lot more with supporting networks, such as the BES, the Biodiversity Ecosystem Services, BESNet UNDP program is doing a lot of outreach in terms of helping make IPBES findings more accessible in the governments and the networks that they support. So finding willing partners who can really help in that process is really important. And I think here the role of an IPOS can be really strong in terms of taking, the very diverse and very complex findings from assessments and working then with scientists who are involved in our assessments to really disseminate and make them much more accessible. And I think some of the mechanisms you've just described, Tanya, are really good for that in terms of getting requests from governments or countries, or maybe it might be regional groupings, or something of a need that there is, and how do you help, facilitate filling that need and that gap. So I think that's really positive. I really think now personally, from my experience in this space, that IPOS has really come around to looking at the IOC, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, as a real anchor for IPOS. I think is absolutely the right thing. I think the United Nations institutions are critically important in global governance. IOC is a very focused knowledge, ocean knowledge component of UNESCO. But it has its limitations and its, resourcing limitations, personnel limitations, and the mandates are very wide. How do they fulfill that? And you've identified how IPOS can fulfill a part of IOC's existing mandate that it hasn't been able to necessarily satisfy, and building on the leverage of the Ocean Decade and all the partners who have been involved so far, and sort of, consolidating and focusing that in ways that can really provide for specific needs that come as requests from countries and from stakeholders and so on. So I think that's really positive, and that fits so well with what existing panels and platforms can provide, have already provided, and then also given the outputs from what you might be able to do with IPOS in these processes. What the scientific assessments do is they don't do any new research, but they're based on the literature and the information and the documented and credible information there is out there. So the findings from IPOS, particularly on this very rapid sort of turnaround of annual work plans and these action requests and rapid responses, bringing issues up through the seminal processes and so on. These can feed into existing assessment processes and then get incorporated into their findings, which then have really high sort of power and strength when those assessments come out. So I think that closes a few loops and open ends that we haven't really that have been open in the past. So I think that's the comments that I would have, just responding to the specifics of what you just presented, Tanya. I think it's very positive, and really in doing this consultation, actually really effectively identified what are some of the key sort of needs that are unaddressed at the moment that we could really tie up. I think the UN Ocean Conference series is a great way to tie this in, and then have some very rapid, the first 1 or 2 year plan building up to longer term plan is a great way to prototype how this may move forward. And I see it as a very positive way to interact with existing IPBES processes without straining any, but really providing added value and strengthening what we can do and how we can interact with what IPOS might do, and also tie-ins with IPCC and other bodies as well in the complementarity of our mandates and so on. So yeah, so I'll finish with that, I think, so we can move to some of the other panelists look forward to hearing a bit more. So thank you.
Thank you, David. That was a very comprehensive and thorough overview, and so sharp on your perspectives about the setting up of a new organization at this level. So I know you have to go. If you have any final recommendations concerning the Global South, what points we might avoid or stuff like that. And then we move to Dylan, who is also on the train station and need to go. And we would love to hear his transdisciplinary insights. So yes, if you have final remarks, we're glad to hear, David.
Thank you. I'll just say, yes, my apologies. I will have to go because I'm in another meeting at the moment. But if any questions as well, I'll be happy to respond by email back through Tanya and Leopoldo to anything open, and look forward to hearing the final results from this. Thanks very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much, David.
Without further ado, you want to chip in, Tanya? Please.
Just thank you, David, so much for your presence and for your beautiful way of articulating the problem so clearly and simply, really so helpful. And I'm very happy to hear that's starting to resonate. That's good news. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, there was so many messages that I can take. One of them, for instance, he mentioned seeing IPOS as this new connecting tissue between the different organizations that already exists. So why not to say a transdisciplinary connecting tissue? And with that, I will share the floor with Dylan. Hello, Dylan. Are you with us on the
Yes.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Yes, sure. So
okay, great.
let me just give the participants a taste of your background. So this is we're talking Dylan McGarry, a scholar, activist, artist, and story listener. He co-directs the One Ocean Hub and is a senior research associate with Rhodes University. And he has a transdisciplinary PhD and working with environmental justice, ecological citizenship, sustainable development, and arts-based social learning. So he's also a founding member of Empath Theatre, using storytelling to foster empathy and influence policy in innovative ways. So yes, looking forward to hear your thoughts, Dylan.
Thank you so much, Leopoldo, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tanya. That was really, really amazing. I'll start with like an appreciative inquiry, which is just, I think it's long needed a kind of responsive, multi-scalar, transdisciplinary, boundary crossing system that can kind of respond more quickly to some of these processes. My bigger critique of just ocean policy and ocean governance practices, I suppose if I was to zoom out, right out, I think one of the things I've always struggled with policy processes, Western policy processes, is that they are so future obsessed and goal obsessed. Most indigenous societies don't, that we've worked with, or so I can't say all, but many do not work with time in the same way that the Western mindset does, and that that's how the governance systems we've inherited from colonial rule are really like obsessed with the future. So like the sustainable development goals and 20 by 30. But I understand that's the system we've inherited, and we have to work and respond with that as we need to. But I think this is an exciting way to disrupt that and bring us closer to what Donna Haraway calls the thick present. I have a colleague in Colombia who says, for them, they walk backwards into the future, speaking to their ancestors. And I think what this is kind of speaks to is a need to speak to multiple ways of knowing and being and doing in the now. So even the kind of more rapid response with the AI, which I'll have my concerns there later, but I do think that is an amazing innovation, especially that it's a closed system, so that you can work with existing knowledges that have come out. It's not like it's just drawing randomly from, that's what I understand, from like the internet or what's there, but that you're feeding it a very particular set of strategies. The other thing is I just wanted to give an example from South Africa. So, and my struggle with this future-orientated policy practice is, and what we've learned in the One Ocean Hub over the last 6 years, which is a multidisciplinary, it's artists, lawyers, policymakers, marine scientists, anthropologists, sociologists, indigenous leaders, all thinking about the future of ocean governance in very deep and responsive ways, accountable ways. And I think one of the things we've learned is that a lot of, we can be as prepared as we possibly can, but then you have these outliers. So it's an example in Durban, where I grew up on the east coast of South Africa. We had a massive political insurrection and rioting for weeks that was coupled with some of the worst floods in recorded history, coupled with the COVID-19 lockdown. There was almost nothing that could have prepared for us to anticipate such a devastating time. And there was just no policy that prepared the city for this. And there was almost no science that prepared them to be responsive to something that catastrophic. But what there was meaningful, quite powerful social tissue. And you saw, in some cases, neighborhoods like supporting each other and responding in real time. So I think what I like about this is that it makes that real time call and response practice a little bit more possible, I imagine, and actually trying to lean into that more in how we fine tune this. So yeah, I think that's a really important thing. We've just written a paper which looks at developing a lateral line organ for hot messes. And what I don't know if you know, in fish, they have this line that runs along their body, and it allows them to sense the pressure of their neighbor as they swim. And we use that as a figuration to think of more responsive practices. And that's in understanding that it's I think the thing that we learned in just thinking like that and just taking a moment to like imagine through the bodies of fishes of how could people move in that way is that you can have, it's about kind of calling and responding with micro adjustments in the thick present, rather than trying to reach some like future goal that hasn't anticipated all these, what we're going to see more of, like climate catastrophes and political struggles and all kinds of new injustices as new technologies emerge and wicked problems. So I think any system that allows us to kind of, I'm writing another paper on pedagogies of echolocation, like thinking like how whales echolocate and with each other and with environments. And I think anything that allows us to stay in conversation with the real realities as they are on the ground is going to really change the game. So yeah, I think I'm really excited about that, and I would love to learn more about these systems. My concerns are that the ocean policy in itself has a lot of blind spots. There's a lot of power imbalances. I mean, I was really happy to hear that like you don't have an issue with global South partners. You actually have an issue of trying to find better global North partners. That's very exciting. But I think the dominant, we need to start thinking about how these systems can exist in vernacular languages. In Africa, Steve Biko wrote about the personality of the situation. Nomalanga Mkhizi is writing about idiomatic reasoning. There's other forms of like divine African science, for example, which kind of is different to how meaning making is made like in kind of contemporary science. And what we've learned in the hub is systems in which things can happen in people's own language, using their own idioms and their own indigenous protocols to respond. So I think it would be exciting to kind of hold this system up to different indigenous leaders, different also looking at artists who've been involved in solidarity work with small-scale fishers, for example, and others, and just seeing in what ways could that nuance and that kind of idiomatic reasoning or vernacular response occur. And then the question I have with AI is, often these algorithms, so much research is going into how these algorithms are so biased and so Western centric. They often can be quite racist, because they just mirror the kinds of systems of power that we are, and we know policies, processes, and governance processes. We've inherited a lot of assumptions, very Western assumptions that we're still trying to struggle. I'm actually traveling right now with Professor Lisa Morgera. She's the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights and Climate Change, and we created the One Ocean Hub together. So we were chatting together while we were listening. I hope that's okay. But we were just thinking about how some of these systems need like some kind of deepening and kind of a greater responsive humanity to how the soul can show up in these policy spaces. So I think overall, I would say I'm very excited about the possibility, because for me, what I've learned, especially from the groups like the Coastal Justice Network, Masifundise, the Legal Resource Center, Natural Justice, people who are working in kind of very responsive ways to ocean governance issues, anything that allows us to call and respond with like issues in the now, in the thick present, I think is going to really change the game. So I'm overall excited. And I think there would be, if we use that same principle of calling and responding with this actual system, we could try refine it with communities and really, and just make the assumption, because things come with it. Let's assume that the system is potentially inherently biased in many ways. And there's a lot of power dynamics we need to manage in how it's used. And I think if we go in with that assumption, we'll be more open and vulnerable to seeing how it can adjust to real world community needs. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I'll be listening. I'm gonna switch off my video, but I'm gonna be hopping on a train in 10 minutes. So yeah, I misjudged the timing. I'm so sorry. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Dylan. That was a brilliant intervention and contribution. We really appreciate your efforts to be present here. I know you're busy traveling, and yeah, it highlights to me. Well, we were talking about this connecting tissue, transdisciplinary tissue amongst the organizations, but you're also highlighting that the word transdisciplinarity goes much deeper. So how to institutionalize transdisciplinary in a UN body that is clearly Western oriented in the way it operates.
Yeah.
So how to institutionalize transdisciplinary, how to keep the fish lines on our bodies, the competencies that the people that will be in front of IPOS needs to really reach out in such a sensitive way to the diversity of the diversity of knowledges that exists in the global south and global north. Right? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe just to respond quickly to that, is that I think maybe it's moving beyond transdisciplinarity and a yes and, not an either or, towards trans-epistemological or onto-epistemological realities. So in that sense, like other ways of knowing and being and doing that's gonna need some really creative thought of how they actually interact with policy processes. And that's why we've been using theater in the UN, and we've been using public storytelling, and we've been using art and animation and film, because they can hold sometimes the intangible heritage realities of the ocean as proxy, that can challenge, I think, what we've been arguing and writing about are the evidence hierarchies and policy. So I suppose what I'm saying is that this system will definitely have evidence hierarchies of what counts as knowledge, because I mean, every institution we have has that, from education to law, what counts in the courtroom. But we had some breakthroughs where we were able to use art as evidence in the Shell court case, for example, to support small-scale fishers' argument of why their intangible heritage was in danger. And that could only be, and thinking less about fact in a sense, scientific fact, and more about affect, like how there's certain things like the concept that ancestors live in the sea for many South Africans. The more important thing is how can we affect the reality of that to judges or to decision makers. So yeah, I think a trans-epistemological or onto-epistemological practice embedded in the system will help a lot. But yeah, I'm going to watch it very closely. I'm very excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any comments, Tanya, on Dylan's intervention?
Yes, absolutely. I feel like I'm smiling so much from that conversation because it just makes my heart so happy to remember that we're humans trying to do this work, that we are connected to this earth and to the ocean, and that there's such a deep rooting that we all have, that we sometimes get lost in the world of, you know, words and science and documents, and actually just to remember those very beautiful imageries that you gave us there, Dylan, and to, you know, just to reaffirm all of what you've said as a core, like a groundswell underneath my motivation, certainly in starting this project. It completely resonates with me, and we really want to bring more of this approach to the table. And I completely agree that something innovative and new needs to come with new ways of thinking, new ways of hearing, new ways of feeling, and new ways of expressing. And I'm super excited to work with you on how we communicate and share ideas and thoughts. So thank you so much for making the time. It was really lovely to hear you speak.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. So so we have 30 minutes of this very nice conversation. We will hear now from Leandra, and then hopefully have a roundup with our participants. Thank you for staying with us on board. So I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Leandra Gonçalves, my friend, assistant professor at the Institute of Marine Science at the Federal University of São Paulo. She has a PhD in international relations and a postdoc in the University of São Paulo, over 10 years, much over 10 years of experience in marine governance, focusing on science policy interface and gender issues in Brazil. So she's a co-founder of the Women's League of the Ocean, for the Ocean, and is a researcher with the Brazilian Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. This is a national platform that is working out assessments also in the interface of oceans science to policy. She has also worked with organizations such as Greenpeace, the NGO Mata Atlântica, SOS, and served as lead author for UNEP's Global Environmental Outlook 6. So she's also working with the Nexus assessment of IPBES. So Leandra, floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here. I reckon you have some slides. Go for it.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you, Tanya, for the invitation. It was really inspiring to hear the others that came before me. I guess the talk I'm bringing here, it's going to complement a little bit because I got some lessons from the subnational projects that I have been working on. And I guess this will help to IPOS understand how we can also, even in international scales, help to solve or even transform problems that we have in the local scales, and how we can all work across the scale. So this is pretty much what I'm going to talk here. Oops. Okay. So I'm sharing here the experience from 3 projects that my research group has been working on, and it's what.
Sorry, Leandra, I think we're on your slide deck. If you perhaps before you share your screen, you can put them. Oh yeah, if you can change it. We're seeing your slide deck, not the entire screen.
Oh yeah, I don't know why. Let me see.
So before.
It's full now?
No, still on the slide deck. So before you share your screen, if you before you share your screen, you can put on full screen and then share your screen.
Okay, just a second there. Sorry about that. See if that worked. Is it working now?
No, it's still on your slide deck. There's something that you do that it changes to the full screen, but then it comes back.
That's weird.
Otherwise, you can just go and scroll straight from.
Let me see if I share entire screen. That maybe works. Is it working now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, sorry about that. So the knowledge I want to share here is about these 3 projects that are being developing in a subnational scales, but I guess they have some lessons to be shared in this knowledge and policy interface that could also help IPOS to understand this across the scales, governance and knowledge and policy interface. So one of these projects is supported by FAPESP, we call Meritorious, and it's a project that is focus on empowering traditional coastal communities in Marajó Island, specifically in Jubim community. And through the co-management of marine and coastal reserves, we try to address social environmental conflicts to enhance livelihoods. So we have a very big group of over than 30 researchers from different areas. So it's very interdisciplinary project trying to go beyond and reach the transdisciplinarity with those stakeholders. And then we have Mosaico Mar. Mosaico Mar is a transdisciplinary initiative that have been working with the coastal managers and marine protected areas managers through the São Paulo coast. And through these collaborative approaches, we are trying to involve local stakeholders, scientists, and policymakers to understand how this territory is connected through ecosystem services and nature contributions to people, and how the policy institutional arrangements should be the mirror, or at least reflect the situation we have in the reality in the policy making helm, as it's completely disconnected actually. And then the last one is Jarcomar, is a governance project that seeks to integrated coastal and marine management. Those who knows São Paulo areas knows that all our policy and managing are from 1980s or 1990s. So we have more than 30 years of our policy that still need a little bit update, especially to address climate change impacts and improving this kind of governance frameworks to adjust a little bit more with the environment that we have here. And the idea is to get through this science and policy interface to review the state coastal management plan. So through these projects, we have taken some lessons. And one of them is that working with these local stakeholders, it's more than clear that we need to prioritize community resilience, inclusive conservation to protecting local livelihoods, and then reach the conservation we aim to guarantee the maintenance of ecosystem services. And this challenge mirror issues in many global south coastal regions. We are talking about Marajó Island, São Paulo coast, and this could bring some lessons, important lessons for small island developing states and other coastal communities globally. So I guess one of the IPOS recommendations that I could offer here is that through these different countries from the global south and the subnational learnings that they are gathering, we could have some lessons that could gain scales to the transformation we need in the global south countries. One of the frameworks we have been working on through this project is this decolonial coastal management. Because even if we are working these Western societies, we are using international Western frameworks, we always have our reality here. And the reality we have here is that the global environmental change and the neoliberal global context are pushing through these local communities and causing and exacerbating social environmental conflicts. So the colonial framework approach that we are working here, especially in this paper that we just submitted, and I guess Victor Henk, one of the lead author of this paper, is also here with us in this panel, is the idea of having the colonial approach that could come from bottom up to transform the social environmental conflicts those communities are facing through these environmental and social impacts, the use of environmental knowledge, and the control over natural resources. So the idea here is that we could have, and we should stress, the importance of integrating local knowledge, and not only integrating, go beyond that and offer conditions for this traditional ecological practice be embedded in the decision-making processes. If we do not succeed on that, we probably still are making the business as usual that we have been doing in the past years, but the knowledge we are going to producing are not reflecting the necessary practices we need to change in the local scales. So in the Global South, communities often have deep historical relationship with the marine environment, and that should really inform policies. And that's why I would like to stress the importance and the key role of IPOS in bringing these different lessons across Global South countries, across local communities that have their similarities, but also their difference in the contextual conditions, but that could inform international policies. So we could work across the scales. So one of the example I would like to share here is the role of traditional Kaisarats communities in managing coastal ecosystems. And that really provides valuable insights for sustainable management. So IPOS should prioritize those kind of knowledge systems to build adaptive, locally relevant solutions that could even work in this international global water. We could decolonize the knowledge and bring transformative change to the local environmental as well. So when we talk about demands, maybe not only taking demands from the states, but also take demands from the local communities that could gain scale through this decolonial coastal management process, through the community empowerment, knowledge co-production, which I guess IPOS has already many lessons to be shared, cultural continuity, environmental stewardship. And here I would like to flag the importance of advocacy in negotiation. I guess David Obura pointed that pretty well, that sometimes we are producing knowledge, and I'm gonna share the experience here we had with this national platform. So we are producing very usable knowledge, but this knowledge really, there is still a gap for this knowledge to inform public policies and to promote change, because we are missing this conveyor belt that could be like a bridging organization doing advocacy for transformative change that we really need in the local scale, national scale, and international scale. So the idea of our framework is that through this 5 principles, we could bring lessons from the Global South. What I want to share here is also the experience we have with the BPPS, which is a Brazilian platform for biodiversity and ecosystem services. We have just launched the summary for decision makers, and we are about to launch the whole diagnostic about the situation in marine and coastal environment in Brazil. And one of the things we have done is that besides we have been working the same logic of IPBES, so the same way of IPBES do the assessment. So we use it, all the framework and way of operate, but we also have a chapter that was wrote with the local communities, with their demands, with their knowledge, with their way of speaking, with their way of meaning the change they are perceiving in the environment. And that is fitting in this assessment and aiming to promote transformative change in decision-making process. So in my opinion here, and based on the experience I have had in these different forums, the successful governance requires collaborations between the local communities, scientists, policymakers across the scales, so we can reach the transdisciplinary governance. And one of the gaps we have to fill is that this diverse perspective needs to be incorporated, and particularly for those that are marginalized and indigenous community. And the way we have done for the BPPS here in Brazil, I guess is a way to go to bring this knowledge to a more standardized process, and then do the advocacy for changing the way the policy has been done. One of the things we have realized as well is that, especially in Brazil, but I believe in many other Global South countries, is that the people who are suffering the impacts, that are local people, that are in the beaches, in our coastal cities, in coastal communities, they are not the ones who are making the law, who are making decisions, who are making the policies. So we have this kind of policy disconnect that Gigi Webster, Professor Gigi Webster, that is here with us as well, has already documented for different topics, as fisheries, oil spills, and so many others. So when we have this policy disconnection, it's very hard to make the people who are making laws or making policies understand the local realities those marginalized people are facing. So I have been working with the IPBES and also the third World Ocean Assessment, and I have been witnessing the bureaucratic process and the challenge that they are facing to include local knowledge in their assessment. And we have been able to give some steps ahead. So in case of the IPBES, for instance, in this Nexus report that David Obura just mentioned, that we are going is going to be launched probably in 17th of December this year, we are able to invite local people, representatives of local communities, indigenous people, to join the assessment as contributing authors or even authors. So in our case, for the chapter 4, the one I worked on governance for Nexus assessment, I could invite my friend from the south of Bahia, Gesiane Leite, which is one of the women leader for the extractive group of women, and she was one of the contributing author of the chapter. So I guess through this different local knowledge and local scales, we are also able to get this knowledge and transform the assessment we have been producing. The same works for the World Ocean Assessment. Some years ago, I guess, World Ocean Assessment 2, we were not able to invite local communities or ILQ people to contribute to assessment. And now when the countries approves, we can also invite those stakeholders to contribute and provide their knowledge. So now we are not talking more about only scientific assessment, we are going beyond that, and we are talking about knowledge assessment, which I really believe that's much more powerful in terms of transformative change that we really need for the ocean governance for the next few years. So my 2 cents here of contributions is that IPOS could ensure leadership and representation from the Global South countries in its decision-making bodies, which I believe you have been already doing this. And this would allow for more balanced perspective and solutions that reflect the realities of ocean-dependent nations and epistemologies from the South. And we have not only to guarantee or wish that, we need to provide conditions for that happen. Because we also need to keep in our mind that those people working and trying to make change in their own national domestic situation, they are sometimes overburdened with so many problems they need to change in their country. So when we want to invite them to work on international scales, which is really important, we need to provide conditions for that happen as well. And I believe also IPOS should, beyond to address and provide knowledge for this science and policy interface, it should work as a bridging organization on international level to help knowledge could reach the target spaces that we need to transform or we need to see the changes. And the third point is that this adaptive science and policy interface that should advocate for IPOS to create flexible and adaptive frameworks that can respond to a varying socio-economic environmental context from the Global South. It's not to get a very good lesson learned or a very good recipe that has been worked somewhere, but we should embracing co-management models where communities are empowered to participate in governance. There are so many lessons we could learn from the local scales, and that should gain scales to get international as well and be shared with other Global South countries. And I guess this is it. I'm more than happy to join this talk, and I'm here to reflect more with my colleagues here in this panel. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leo, for the invitation.
Thank you, Leandra. Wow, what a rich suite of very concrete cases and sharp suggestions for IPOS to uptake. Really wrapping up for the motives of our session to reflect about the perspective of Global South in this new global organization. So thank you very much. We'll have several very interesting and thoughtful people on the room. I hope we can hear at least some of them in this perhaps 10-15 minutes that we have. Also inviting Tanya to give her final thoughts on it, but perhaps why not? Yeah, Digi, please jump in.
Hi, Leopoldo, and everyone. Thank you, Leandra, for mentioning my work. I'm DG Webster. I guess you can't see me probably. I'm a voice from nowhere, but I'm a professor in the Environmental Studies Department at Dartmouth College. And I've spent my entire career trying to understand why policymakers do or do not do certain things, right? Why do they design policies in particular ways? Why do they implement or fail to implement? And so, yes, disconnects and power disconnects is a major part of what I do. But I wanted to say that I'm very impressed to see all of the work with the IPOS and also the other presenters here today. And I would just want to sort of think more deeply about the political aspects of the knowledge that's being created and shared. One of the reason I'm here in Brazil for my Fulbright is to think about how can we use narratives and just so stories to communicate with decision makers in ways that is actually persuasive to them. So I absolutely agree with everything Leandra said, and also the other speakers in terms of the importance of indigenous knowledge and those kinds of things. But ultimately, we need to convince the people with power to take that seriously. Otherwise, you end up with stakeholder fatigue and people just opting out because they know they're going to these things, they're not getting listened to. And so thinking really more about what the politicians and the policymakers want would be my suggestion, and I'm happy to do more of that in other fora with you guys. But for instance, I was recently teaching in Namibia, and we were doing marine policy there, and everybody who we talked to who cared about the oceans was so sad about the oceans, but everyone we talked to was also worried about unemployment. And the Namibian government knows that that's what's going to get them elected. So they're bringing in these huge projects with lots of donor funding on green hydrogen, which is going to totally screw up some of the ocean. They're starting to drill for oil because now they have, marine oil, because they've discovered it, right? So we can do a lot with the science, but ultimately finding ways to connect, not just to the land is the source of our problems, but the land can be the source of solutions, right? If we can make those connections back to what the policymakers want and what they need. But otherwise, that's my main contribution. I was very, very impressed with the comprehensiveness of the plan and all of the ideas that clearly took a long time and lots of consultation to work out.
Thank you, DG. It's very profound and sharp. Also, I could see you were speaking of Namibia, and I was clearly referring to Brazil, our situation here with how this wave of blue growth and speculation it's occurring, and how it destroys the agency of local actors and how they come together to confront. And I think transdisciplinary research it's a good platform or method to engage them, but also not being naive that we will for sure face what you're saying, the opposition and the political aspect, something that I think the Earth System Governance Ocean Task Force, which, by the way, Tanya, Leandra and DG Websters are the co-hosts of the Earth System Governance Ocean Task Force. And I think it's very timely that this meeting is occurring, so we can perhaps following up see how we might work together in some of the more practical aspects of the shaping up of IPOS. Thank you, DG. Perhaps one more intervention from the room. Who else? I see Victor here was also leading a very cool paper on coastal decolonial coastal management. If you want to share us the implications of that approach, or Leticia also from an NGO in Brazil, Shanna, Scott Carney. Well, be welcome to join. Hi, Victor.
Oh yeah, you can hear me well, right? Yeah, I was just Leandra already showed a little bit of what we're doing in Jubim, right? Like, so Jubim is this traditional artisanal fishing community in the north coast of Brazil, and actually in the Amazon basin, in the Amazon River Delta. And through empirical work there in Jubim, and also with our own reflections, and we came up with this framework of decolonial coastal management, which we're still working on. I mean, this is just a first, let's say, well, reflections, our first reflections, and we just submitted this paper in marine policy. We hope to have it published soon. Obviously, we'll let you all know. But so we that's the first step, as I was mentioning. I do want to engage with that a lot more from now on, and maybe go beyond Jubim and start working with other stakeholders. For example, doing interviews with well, practitioners, managers, coastal managers, and policymakers, and to actually see and have their view on the coastal management, the traditional and actually conventional coastal management that has been being done throughout, not only in local scale. When I mean local scale, I mean where Jubim is located in Pará, and then go beyond regional scale, national, Brazil, and then international scale. That's what we're aiming for. And I do intend to spend 1 year abroad in order to attend to this international scale, doing interviews, participant observation in events. And yeah, just I spoke too much, and we are definitely having more about this decolonial coastal management in the years to come.
And thank you, Victor. Yes, I wonder, because it's such a powerful concept, decolonial coastal management, so to really a transformative approach of the status quo. And I wonder, Tanya, perhaps you can pick up on that and then give your final thoughts. I wonder, because you see UNESCO, the IOC, the UN Ocean Decade, they're very careful with words. And just after so much criticism about the ocean literacy approach, which initially for me it sounded more like a technocratic concept coming from the global north to global south. In Brazil, it's translated as cultura oceânica, ocean culture. So it misses, I think, the pedagogical and technical aspects of the power relations within the concept. So I wonder how, and only now UNESCO has adopted critical ocean literacy as one type of approach, and pluriversal ocean literacy, which embodies different knowledges. So I wonder how decolonial coastal management would sound for IOC and the work that we'll be doing. And so thank you, everyone. And Tanya, you have the floor for final remarks.
Thank you so much. So thank you to Leandra and to DG and Vitor for your comments. So I'll just respond briefly to Leandra, just to say thank you so much for your very insightful presentation. Super useful to have practical case examples that can demonstrate these principles, because I think the sooner we get out of theoretical ideas and into practical, information, data, and results, the more concrete we get, the faster we actually get the attention of policymakers, and also just within the team, just to become concrete about what are we talking about, how do we actually do this. It's so super useful to have that. And I think the point made about decolonial coastal management is so interesting and links to what Dylan was talking about how this Western framing really shapes our thinking, and and really shapes the way we approach knowledge, the way we approach meaning, the way we attribute value. And really we miss the humanity in that approach. We miss what's going on the ground for 80% of the world's population. So I think it's super important. But I also hear what DG was saying, which is that no matter how strongly we all feel about this, we have to speak to the people that can make the decisions in a way that they will hear us. And I'm really interested to hear more from you, DG, about how we do that, and what are the most powerful and effective tools that we can use to bridge that gap, because that's the essence of it, is this need of moving away from this Western approach, but this real complexity around policymakers just looking for the votes and doing what they need to do. We need to shift that paradigm with all of our collective brain, which has been amazing to listen to, and I'm super inspired by everyone's conversations today. So thank you so much for the time and for being here, and thank you, Leopoldo, and to the Earth System Governance for having us.
Yes, thank you. You want to respond, DG, quickly, if you want? If not,
I don't think there is a quick response to that question. But I think one of the things we found in our research is if you can focus on those specific examples, but in a way that you look at, well, what's been the pluses and the minuses for the decision makers involved? Right? So not just saying this is what's great for the community, but saying this is why it's been good for the decision makers, and also providing that information to people who are already in the system and understand how the politics work. This is what I've heard so many times from like mid-level people, is they know what needs to be done. They know it needs to be comprehensive. They know they want to work with states. They want to do these things. They need the information that will help them convince the higher ups. Right. So providing them with those examples that say, if you do this, it's going to work terribly for you. Or if you do this other thing, it's going to really turn out really nicely. You're going to get more, and providing them with those options. So, oil and gas, how can we provide other options that provide those votes, that provide that income stream? How can we say, look, there's other things that you can do besides going for this that'll give you the same kind of benefits, then that is sort of a way to go forward. But yeah, it's an uphill battle for sure.
yes, thank you. Yes, the speculations about the future, as Dylan was saying, that the future is being negotiated without proper engagement of the people that are facing the consequences of the futures. So, for instance, you mentioned oil and gas, but also offshore wind exploration for energy is being in the global south. There has been a lot of speculations, and we don't have even one park established so far, but already the negotiations of the future are affecting how the actors and the politics are ongoing and already influencing ocean governance. Also connecting DG to the need for real concrete study cases. We are piloting, IPOS, it's piloting one study case now with Mesoamerican small-scale fisheries organizations in Costa Rica. We'll be in Cali this weekend now to kick off with fisheries leaders from several countries in Mesoamerica to precisely to evaluate collectively how to accelerate implementation of target 30 by 30, but in a human rights-based approach. So the outputs, the outcomes of this transdisciplinary engagement within the IPOS framework will be presented by fishers and scientists, transdisciplinary scientists, in the upcoming United Nations conference in Nice next year. So it will be precisely to show the don'ts and do's and the benefits and challenges that we will have. Because really to streamline transdisciplinarity with all its depth of implications in terms of human relationships in IOC, just to have a new institution sitting in France, in Paris, distant from our corners of coastal areas, it's definitely something that we are not looking for, but definitely something that can strengthen our abilities as researchers in sustainability, in in our own countries to strengthen how the policies for transdisciplinary research and the funding for transdisciplinary research and the capacities are being appropriately addressed. So we are able to do this connection that Leandro says, that we have a workforce, competent workforce, to mobilize and engage with co-production of knowledge that then can connect in a responsible approach to what's going on at the international level. So with that, I thank you so much for your attention and engagement. It was really a pleasant conversation. I am afraid we are on the top of our 1 hour and a half. No, Harita, any final recommendations? Thank you, Harita, for making this possible. Thank you for in the name of the organizers of the conference. I also have to mention this is an activity of the Earth System Governance Brasilia Research Center. And with Ana Flavia and many others from their system governance community in Brazil. Leandra is also part of the office, and so thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much to everyone. Really valuable conversation.
Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of the forum.
Yes, enjoy the forum.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Have a
much.
good day.
Okay, thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.